Something like that. I watched this show on YouTube. Came on MacGyver, and it reminded me of me growing up watching American TV and seeing that white hero MacGyver was very smart, right? And this is what I pictured America would be like if it would come to America. And MacGyver was part of the Phoenix Foundation in Arizona. Well, I've been there, and it's nothing like what I used to see in the shows growing up as a kid. It's nothing like it. In fact, where are all the white heroes gone, right? So today I'm going to be talking about where do the other races come from? This is a question that comes up often. Last week I wanted to talk about it, but we were talking about so many things that I couldn't get to it. So I'm going to discuss it today. And leading up to this, I want to talk a little bit about what happened this week and how it also relates to the video I'm going to make today, right? So hi Jan, Crystal, Aeons, Karen. Hello everybody. Good morning, Christina. Yeah. So there was this, let me see. Oh yeah. What I do on my channel is trying to go take the red pill and look first at the truth without any compromise, right? And what I see in all these major outlets, all these huge channels on the news, all these Republican and truth tellers, what they all do is still compromise, right? And I believe that we first need to go to the uncompromising truth. And if we have the full truth, then we can see what we can do about the other stuff, right? But if you keep compromising, the whole narrative just floats around and will never get solved, right? Some people argue, well, why don't you do actually things, right? Look at these people in Arkansas. They're actually building a white communities. So you can talk about these things, but it doesn't change anything. Well, I beg the difference because the change starts within. It changes in your mind. You can do whatever you want, but if the mind is not changed, if the mind is not set on the truth of our Father, nothing will work. And my goal is to unify all the Adamic people and to let them see the truth, right? Then God will pour His Spirit, right? We have to get out of the spirit of delusion that God sent our people because they did not have a love for the truth. So let's go as close to the truth as we can. And especially when we talk about history that goes back 6,000, 10,000 years, it is very hard to find the exact truth, but there are a lot of indications and pieces of the puzzle we can put together and create a much more clear picture. What makes sense of where we are right now, right? So many people are being attacked and stuff, but they still are the Diet Coke of truth, right? Can you imagine what would happen to us and my channels, to me, right? If I would become as famous as Charlie Kirk, right? Because in my opinion, Charlie Kirk was still very compromised, even though he came closer and closer to the truth, but still also he compromised. I'm going to talk about that a little bit, Charlie Kirk. Also, someone said, well, Chris, everybody always believed in the Trinity, right? So in order to unify us, we need to, I have to change my narrative. But guys, also this is compromising, right? Not everybody believed in the Trinity. The Trinity doctrine was forced on the church. And be honest, guys, all these church doctrines they have been preaching as long as we live, and even before that, all these doctrines, what did it actually do to us? Well, it brought us in destruction, right? So many Christians try to get people back to God. That's a good thing, right? That's what many of them try to do. But they don't really bring them back to our Father. They bring them back into the church doctrines, which didn't help us in the first place. And my channel is about the truth, not about church doctrines, right? Because there's many problems with these church doctrines, right? And I do think it's very important to understand who our Jesus is. And I think all these doctrines from Trinity takes away what Jesus did for us, right? So it is very confusing, all these doctrines, right? That's why you have these non-stop debates. One is Pentecostals versus Trinitarians, and everything is so simple, guys. And the truth is very hard to swallow for many, but the truth is always simple, right? You don't need hours and hours of professor and college degrees pastors to explain you certain things, because the truth is very simple, right? Well, Christina, don't be scared, but the problem is no one will benefit. No one, no race, no mixed people will. No one will benefit if we just go to the basics, right? Because it has become. If there are people here who say, "Well, I got a little bit of this and a little bit of that in my DNA, so am I excluded?" Listen, there's now a narrative being brought out more and more that it really doesn't matter, and we see the world is headed in the wrong direction, right? No one will benefit. You know, if you create a country like America, and then after a while you say, you know what, all peoples, all races are created in the image of God, therefore it doesn't really matter, right? We cannot judge people on the content of the character individually, so it doesn't really matter, right? Now you can see what's happening now. What do you think what would happen if you bring all these races and religions in? You make them part of the decision making, right? In legislation, in this, governors, mayors, in the Senate, in the House of Representatives, all these things, all different spirits, all different opinions, all different desires, all different backgrounds. What do you think what would happen if you put all these different spirits in one country and you give them the equal right to make decisions? Guys, this is where we are now. It is just a big mess, right? So we need to get back to the basic truth without any compromising, right? And then we can see what we're going to do about the other things, right? But just to say it doesn't really matter, right? Well, it used to matter for a long time. Yes, Crystal, the fruit of the Trinity doctrine is also part of the Adamic destruction. Do you know there was this very knowledgeable man called Servetus, right? He was an expert in astrology, geography, mathematics, biology, you name it, he knew it all, right? He was a very intelligent man. And he studied the scriptures, and he said, there is no Trinity in the Bible, right? And at that time, Calvin was very a big man in the church. He's still worshipped by many Christians, John Calvin. But Servetus wrote Calvin a letter. He said, listen, what you're saying is not true. He provided evidence. He made a cause. And you know what Calvin did? Calvin went to the church. He said, hey, this guy's a heretic. And they arrested Servetus and they burned him alive on the stake using green wood that burns slower. That's what Calvin did. Still put on a pedestal by most Christians. So the Trinity came about with a lot of bloodshed and a lot of violence. It was forced upon us. And yes, our forefathers believed it because all they had was this translation and those pastors. They didn't have the resources we have today, right? They didn't have the tools we have to compare our English Bibles with the Greek and with the Hebrew, right? We didn't have all that. But now that we do have it, people still just don't want to investigate it, right? I don't want to talk too much about the Trinity today. If you're new to my channel, I made a ton of videos about that topic, right? Today I'm going to talk about where do these black people come from. Christina says, there are a lot of things in my life and my parents' lives that have been undeniable, led by God. Yeah, I believe that, Christina. That's not what I'm saying, right? I'm just saying now we are in a mess. And if we say it doesn't matter no more, right, we see more and more amalgamation. And in the end, there will be no more white people left, right? And of course, there are people who are not white who do have a love for God, right? But also, a lot of them have no respect for the European people, and they have no care whatsoever that the European people are losing everything, right? So we have to get back. We need leadership, and we have done this as European people. The ones who had the Christ, they led everything. They influenced everything. They influenced society, right? And it was free, prosperous, and safe. And I even still, in the 70s, 80s, I still experienced it, right? I didn't grow up as a Christian yet. I felt safe, right? The things that are happening today were not happening. It was very, very rare, right? Now you see in the Netherlands, for not just the Netherlands, I was watching the Netherlands, and there's this guy who's making a case against mass immigration and the influx of Islam and all these things. And there was this guy, he was black with a man bun, and he is part of the Christian party. Because he believes in Jesus, he's now part of the Christian party. And it is one of the most Marxist communist parties in a parliament, right? And now we have Turks, Muslim Turks, who have their own party. What do you think? What would happen to a country if you have all these different spirits and religions all being part of parliament? Guys? And if you say I have a little bit of Indian, I'm not going to exclude anybody from my channel. I love everybody, but we need to go to the truth, right? John says, all truth seekers have been led by the Almighty. There are too many occurrences in my life pushing me in a direction that only God could be behind. Yes? Well, nothing can exist without an eternal spirit, right? Nothing can exist, right? There is something that is in everything, right? Even in trees, right? But the Bible talks about that God chooses specific people to work through, to create order, right? So that's what we're going to, and if you have structure and order, then even other people benefit from that, right? But now they say colonialism was, everything was evil what that we did, right? They act as if we invaded these peaceful, beautiful countries, right, where these people lived. No, they lived not in peace. It was chaos, right? And by the way, when you say man, right, manos, that means hand, right? So basically, we were the hand of God, creating structure, law, and beauty on this earth, and we are hated for it. We are called names for it, right? Because so many people still believe in the blue pill, right? They still watch the news. They still watch these YouTube channels, right? It is all blue pill, guys. You know, growing up in the Netherlands, right? I was always watching shows from America like MacGyver, right? But besides MacGyver, most of the shows, many shows already, especially in the 90s, I remember that my mother said, how come that these Americans always look a bit off? They look so different. Why? Because they're white people, right? Little did I understand what I understand now. The reason that my mother noticed that, because she still grew up in a country where it was 99.9% white, she noticed that the Americans she saw on TV were not white, even though they look white. Now we know that most of them are Jewish, right? All these TV stars, right? So that's why, right? So now we have all these truthers, and if a truther gets so much media attention, right, is invited on all these big outlets, right? Do you there is something wrong with that, right? How come if you really, really tell the truth that you are allowed on these big platforms, right? Piers Morgan and everything. Is that really, really, guys? It's all part of the blue pill. And yes, there are people like Andrew Tate. Andrew Tate is not a white man, even though he looks a little bit white, but he is half black, right? So now we have half black people or black people telling us the truth about our nations. That it used to be that way, but now it's so normal. So what I always say, I have nothing against Andrew Tate because he talks a lot about the truth, but also these people are used to tell you, okay, he tells you the full truth, but it is not the full truth. There is a little bit of compromise in there just by the very fact that he is not white. That's already compromising. Where are all the real European people speaking up? And if they do, they're not going to get big platforms, right? The Hodge twins, they are half black, half white, even though they look mostly African, right? You can see by the blue eyes that they have a white mother, or maybe she's Jewish, I don't know. They grew up Christian, right? But why is it that Africans are exposing the truth now and have such a big platform, right? Nick Fuentes is not a white man. He is Mexican. Yes, he has some European ancestry, but when you look at him, he looks a little bit like Zac Efron, right? Many Americans look at Zac Efron and say, "Oh, he's a white guy." No, Zac Efron is a Jewish guy, right? And if you wonder why there is so much that most Mexicans they have a little bit of Jewish in them, or even Arab, North African Arab in them. Did the Arabs ever move to? No. Did the Jews ever move there? Yes. But you have to understand that most of men, not all, but many Spanish people, they look darker because they have Arab and black and Jewish DNA in them, right? The Jews have been living in Spain for a long time till Queen Isabella said it's enough. I don't want this Judaism in my country. So either you're going to convert or you're going to leave. Many left to South America and the others stayed behind becoming crypto Jews. That means they, in public they were Catholics, but they kept the Jewish traditions behind closed doors. But over time, these Jews became Catholic and they started to intermarry with the white people, right? Also, the North African Moors who already mixed with the sub-Saharan African slaves. They became Arab. Arab means to become darker. They also were in Spain, right? That's why, and you can look it up yourself if you don't believe me. Just go on YouTube and Google and type in Spanish DNA test, right? And you see all these Spanish people doing DNA test, and they all have Ashkenazi Jew and Arab DNA in them that has been there for hundreds of years, because the Spanish used to be white, blue-eyed people, right? I don't want to offend everything. This is just the truth, right? Hi, David. David says, quick question. Why do I have a crown picture next to my name? Oh, I can see it. A crown with a 3. Um, I think that it means, because here on the top says top fans. So when I click on it, oh, I got a whole bunch of, it probably means if you regularly watch my channel, which I appreciate, right? That's probably why, right? You're number 3, David. You're not my biggest follower, but you're number 3, right? And what about Charlie Kirk? Well, he looks a little bit like he could have a little bit of something else, but so far as I found, he's just British, right? And he indeed could be just an Irishman, right? But did Charlie Kirk tell the whole truth, right? We all heard what happened to him. I'm not going to go too far into that because there is so many things going on around that whole thing, right? If you just watch Fox News and the media, yes, he's obviously shot and died, and then the cops, we got him because this is someone got shot and we get him, right? We got him, they said, and everybody's, oh yeah, we got him, and now there is more. Who was it? Was it really him? There is so much, so I'm not going to even go into this rabbit hole, right? Because that's what they want to do. They want to immediately create all kinds of things, right? There are videos out in slow motion where you can see that the blood is squirted out, went down his shirt and arm, and then it went back up again, and also a ring is a ring. Within a second, move to the pinky. Guys, if we go that, uh, there is so much going on. Some believe it, some don't believe it. I'm not going to give my opinion about all that. But what is, without doubt, is how people react to the fact, to this story that he got shot, right? And we see that a lot of white people cheated, right? They celebrated it. They made TikTok videos, how happy they were with it, right? Some people say, "Wow, I'm so disappointed. I thought it would be a migrant or a black." And no, guys, this whoever did it, right? And it's just a whole strange story. Why are these 2 people behind him a second before he gets shot, doing his cap and a signal, and the other guy also did some kind of hand signal. Guys, it's all by design, right? People say, "See, they were in on it." Of course, they are in on it, but they did. This is not secret science, guys. We know in an age where everybody, you have potentially hundreds of people making videos on a cell phone, and they know that all these footages are getting analyzed. They're not going to be stupid enough to secret. Of course, they know that it's all part of it, and it is just mind blowing, right? So, but Charlie Kirk, right? Why did I make a video mentioning Charlie Kirk a few days before this happened? Because yes, he was good at debate, right? And he told a lot of truth, but I'm going to show you what I mean by compromising, because he indeed started to go against Zionism. But this is what most do. They go against Zionism, what the current government is doing, but at the same time, they still believe that the Jewish people are the Israelites from the Bible, right? Let me see if I can show you what I mean. Let me see where that video is. Um, I'm not gonna get to the other races where they come from, guys. Let me quickly. I pasted that video a while ago, so. Can't find it so quick. As always, when you do things off the cuff, right? Maybe I have it here. David. I think that's. Oh, here.
Let me ask you a question. Do we as Christians have a biblical obligation to the Jews?
You tell me.
Yes, we do it because Paul said first to the Jews.
So this is the mainstream Christian idea. First to the Jews, then to all the non-Jews, right? I explained it already many times that this is not what the Bible is about. This is not what the Bible says. It doesn't say the Jews first and then all the non-Jews, the Gentiles. That's not what the Bible says, guys. It is a translation issue, right? I talked about that many times already, right? So they still believe that the Jews are God's chosen people. They just don't like what Zionists do, right? I want to make a video about the Jewish man who talked about that they are the true Israel, that they are so attacked, everybody hates them, right? But it's going to be another video, right? So besides Charlie Kirk, right? By the way, how is it even possible that he became so famous if he really goes against the narrative, right? And you can have all kinds of arguments and speculations. Was Israel behind it because he started to turn against them, right? We can speculate all day long, but I'm gonna go into biblical truth, right? Without all these things happening, because guys, is it convenient that it is now 24/7 Charlie Kirk, right? And no one, isn't it convenient that suddenly no one thinks about the Epstein files, for example, right? It is very convenient, right? I already see these things coming. Every time the fire gets too hot, something happens, and everybody mind looks at that, right? Another thing that is also a little bit in the shadow now, which was the biggest story of America, was the white girl, the Ukrainian girl who got stabbed in the neck, right? Also, there is some controversial things about it. Guys, doesn't matter what everybody says, right? This white girl got stabbed, right? And was that the most evil thing ever? Well, something was very evil about it, but the fact that she got stabbed, guys, it was just that it was recorded, that it has so much impact. But it happens all the time, right? 2 weeks ago in Amsterdam, a young girl, 17 years old, got also stabbed to death. She must have been terrified, the same as that white girl, right? So it is just that you see it on footage that it has such an impact, right? The crazy stuff was just that no one cared. Everyone just walked away. This is a society that we are living in now, right? So who was this black guy? Let's gradually go to where the black people come from. Let's go there, right? Was this black guy, because this is what they say on the news, right? Especially CNN, right? Did you see that other black guy in CNN that said that we have to think about the black guy who stabbed that girl because he might have had some problems. He might have been under pressure, right? He must have had so much stress from all the white people, right? That you have to have some compassion for him, right? That it is crazy, but that is what he said, right? But what they always do is put black people in the news, right, in suits, and they all try to sound white. It's all part of that compromising to show you there are some good ones around. I'm not talking about the CNN guy, but have you noticed that every time a black guy commits a crime, it is covered by a black news anchor or a black journalist? Every single time. You never see a white man cover this story, right? It's all part of that gaslighting. So it's a good black guy in a suit condemning a mentally ill man. He's not condemning him for being black. No, he's condemning he must have had some problems, right? But who are these black people, right? Who are these black people? You know, where do they come from? And why are they so different, right? Let's go to Genesis. Because by now it should be obvious that black people are not the same, right? And that all races are not created in the image of God. That should be obvious by now, guys. But the church is at fault. The white man is at fault by constantly trying to find angles, right? Yeah, but there are some good ones, right? So we just gonna try to make it work. We're gonna talk about it. We're gonna discuss it. We're gonna judge them on the content of the character. So there are some good. Listen, guys. There is probably in India some really good people, intelligent, hardworking, kind, right? They even might love our culture. Does that mean that we should get 500 million Indians in because there are some good ones? No, of course not, right? Because they will never accept that you are a white man with your own nation. That's why non-white people will, or mixed people even, they will never ever stand up for you. Never. Why would they? They're already mixed. Why would they stand up? Right? Everybody wants to be included in a false gospel. Right? Everybody thinks, yeah, but I'm not white. I'm not going to go to heaven. Everybody is going to stand before God. Right? But that's not the point. Right? Everything is becoming such a mess, guys. The Lord has made all things for himself, even the wicked for the day of evil. Yeah, well, that all things, Jesus is the Lord, is also often taken out of context, right? For example, in Colossians, people say, see, Jesus created all things. This is not what Colossians says at all, but I'm not going to go into that topic today, right? Guys, if you look at Genesis, right, there is a creation, right? And God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion, right? Let us make man in our image. So the church started to interpret it as let us make humanity in our image. Humanity. In other words, man and male of every race. Well, the Bible doesn't say that all races are created in God's image. It doesn't say that. That's what Freemasons tell you guys. The Freemasons in the church have told you this. All men are created in the image of God. That's what the blue pill tells you. Right? This word man in Hebrew is Adam, right? And many of you already know this, but Adam refers to a ruddy man of a fair, ruddy complexion, able to blush, to show blood in the face, of a rosy complexion, right? So it's not talking about all races. And there is an abbreviation of the Adam, that's Adon, right? From that we get Adoni, which means Lord. So this dominion is linked to the word Adam. It's about dominion, right? And not dominion in a way that we're going to be evil oppressors. No, God's hand, man, manos. God will create through us. And we have been doing this. We have been created the most beautiful things in history, right? Guys, this whole Genesis book, because we read it and we take it for granted, But this is so incredibly old, right? And they say Moses wrote it, right? But it's talking about the very creation. Who was there even, right? God told even Job, where were you, right? And Moses was not even there thousands of years before this happened, right? And where did they translate it from? Where did it came from? Is it in the right order, right? I'm not denying scripture. I'm just asking questions, right? So the general idea is when people read this that the universe was just a blob of nothing, right? There's molecules and atoms floating around, right? There was a big bang, and that is the beginning, right? Where God created the heaven and the earth. It was a big bang, right? But it was without form and void. So in England, a church made us watch a video about the Big Bang occurred, and there was all these atoms floating around, and then God, it was without form or void, like a cosmic soup, right? And then God started to create stuff, and that is the very beginning, right? Then God created the animals, and then God created all the man, right? The black man, and that is the church narrative, guys. But if you really do a study, you see much deeper things being revealed, right? And a lot of it is also symbolical, right? So it says here, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth, right? What does it even mean? Is that literally that He created this ball earth and then the heaven, right? I mean, God is in heaven, right? So if God created the heaven right there, where was God before that, right? Did He enter this heaven or no? The heaven is also a symbolical word for authority, right? Let me read something from Jeremiah, because this is basically where we are right now again, right? Let me see here, Jeremiah chapter 2. Had a nation changed their gods, which are yet no gods, but my people, see, my people have changed their glory for that which doeth not profit. Be astonished, O ye heavens, at this, and be horribly afraid. So who's Jeremiah talking to, O heavens? Be astonished, be afraid. You think God in heaven and the angels are afraid? No, it's talking about the people in God's authority. Ye are gods. Under heaven means you have a status of authority. O ye heavens, and be horrible, afraid, be ye very desolate, said Yahweh. For my people have committed two evils. They have forsaken me, the fountain of living waters, and have hewed them out of cisterns, broken vessels that can hold no water. And we see now many people, right, half white, half black. They are broken vessels who can hold no water, right? Because they don't care about this everything. They say, well, it doesn't matter, right? And they advocate for all. They don't care about mixed culture. They don't care. Why would they care? They're already, right? And I would make a case if they would love the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and they would love us, right? That would be a whole different thing. But many don't care about us. They want to be on top. Everybody wants to be on top. And now you have even Africans claiming they are the true Jews. They are the true Israelites. Everybody wants that heaven status, right? But God gave it to us, right? And there are many examples that if, for example, Africans accept our authority, they are much better off. South Africa, for example, is a very good example of that. The black people were way better off when a white man had the authority over South Africa, right? But they want to get rid of the Adam. They want to control everything, and everything is turning more and more evil, right? So God created the heavens and the earth, right? Then he created the animals. Now, the most accepted view of the identity church is that um, the black people, for example, are not included in the Adam, so they must have been in Genesis among the animals, all living creatures, right? But my point would be, why would God do that? Why would God create people who hate us and who are not like us and even will come in and destroy our race? Why would God do that? Because here it says, and God saw everything that was made, and behold, it was very good. So, how can you actually say it's very good? And if you misinterpret these things, we're going to create societies where it doesn't matter, right? You're going to say, well, we have all these different spirits, all these different people, all these different races, all these different religions. So we're going to find common ground. We're going to compromise. We're going to find ways to make it work. But because it's outside of God's will and outside God's creation, it is only creating chaos, right? It is chaos now, guys. We have now a black man and a Pakistani man and a Scottish government telling the Scottish people that Scotland is for everybody, right? We have now black people in the West telling us how we should think and how we should feel. And they give us their perspective on how America and Europe should look like. And it is all based on Marxism that came out of Edom, because the Edomites in Europe were not accepted for a long time. And when they became equal citizens, because of all the civil wars they created, they forced themselves to become equal citizens. And they were the ones who gave us liberalism, right? They took away our identity. They started to intermarry. They even became barons and earls. They started to be the moneylenders to the kings. They were the ones who thought it was a good idea to start a slave trade. Right? They thought it was a good idea to take Africans out of Nigeria and put them to work without any consideration that these people also would eventually multiply. And it was only what the governments always do, short-term thinking. Well, we can profit of it, right? It's very cheap, we can make money. That's how they think. But there was not a consideration, what are we going to do with these people in the future? And a lot of Christians were against it because they say this is not going to work out. Neither of us are going to be happy living together. And you see it now, it happened, right? Still, many try to say, well, we can make it work, but it is obvious after 150 years, or they have been longer here through slavery, but it's obvious that it's not going to work out, even though you always have to mention, yeah, not all, there are some good ones. It doesn't matter. It is obviously not working out. And it's all because of little words. Meanings of words have changed in the Bible, right? So, listen to this, right? When it says, and the earth was without form and void, right? The church teaches you there was a cosmic soup. There was no forms yet, right? But this whole language, first of all, the earth was, that word in Hebrew means was as in has become, right? If I go to a destroyed city and I come back, I said I went to the city and it was destroyed, right? But before that, it was not so. Let me give you an example also from Jeremiah. Right? Let me see. Yeah. So Jeremiah is talking here. I beheld, and lo, the earth, it was without form and void. Same language, without form and void. Jeremiah was not talking about a cosmic soup, right? Read on. And the heavens, and they had no light. The heavens had no light. It's talk about those who are in God's authority. They became evil and they had no light. I beheld the mountains, and lo, they trembled, and all the hills moved lightly. It's all symbolical language, guys. Yes, and these things physically also happened, right? I beheld, and lo, there was no man, no Adam, and all the birds of the heavens were fled. And I think it's Adam here. I have to look that up. I beheld, and lo, the fruitful place was a wilderness, and all the cities thereof were broken down at the presence of Yahweh by his fierce anger. So he says it was empty and void, but then we read all the cities were broken down. Same language. So when we read Genesis, right, something happened before Genesis. There was a world before Genesis, right? Now, other identity people, they think that the when they made the Adam, Genesis 1, that's the same story of when God formed Adam in chapter 2. But I believe that it is different. I think in Genesis 1, God created the white race, right? Something happened there. We don't know how much time there is between Genesis 1 and Genesis 2, right? But what we do know that, let me read it, thus the heavens and the earth were finished and all the hosts of them, right? So you had the white man, you had the animals, everything, right? So it was, he started over, right? And on the seventh day, God ended his work which he had made, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had made. And God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because that in it he rested from his work, and God created and made. This should be the end of chapter 1, even though they put it in chapter 2. Listen, the ancient text didn't have chapters, right? Right? So this is where God rested. It was made, it was good. He created the Adam, the white people, the animals, right? I'm going to get to that point. Where did the other come from then, right? I'm going to get there, right? Then it says, these are the generations of the heavens and the earth when they were created, in the day that the Lord made the earth and heaven, right? And every plant of the field before it was in the earth, and every herb of the field before it grew. For the Lord had not caused it to rain upon the earth, and there was no man to till the ground. There was no Adam to till the ground. When I read this, I see that God created the Adamic people, the white people, to have dominion, right? But here it says there was no more Adam to till the ground. Symbolically, I think that was something happened. There was no Adamic people taking charge no more, right? So, but there went up a mist from the earth and watered the whole face of the ground. And the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground. Is it really saying that this was the first human being ever? Right? And was Adam literally made from clay? Right? God put sand and made a man, and then, right? Because a man is not made of clay, right? So what does the dust mean? Let me show you another example of that dust, how we can interpret the dust. I go to Numbers. Numbers. Here it says, who can count the dust? See the word dust of Jacob, and the number of the fourth part of Israel. So Jacob as a whole is called dust, right? So the way I see it, that this dust is the Adamic people from Genesis 1, right? And from that dust, God formed Adam. So there were already white people around, right? But something happened, right? There was no one to take charge, no one to till the ground, right? The ground of righteousness. So he formed Adam of the dust, right? So from all those white people, God chose this man, Adam, right? So very symbolical language, the breath of life, right? It's a very, this book is so deep, guys. There are messages in here. You have to look really deep there, right? And Adam became a living soul, right? But if you read the rest of the Bible, because you can interpret books by reading the rest of the Bible, we see that Adam was basically the first king and the first priest, right? So, when were the white people made? Well, Adam, the man Adam, was formed around 6,000 years ago, right? Like 4,000 years before Christ, if we count back the generations, because God gives us the genealogy of the man Adam. And if you read the genealogy of the man Adam, we see there is no other races mentioned, right? From Adam to Enoch, Enoch to Noah, right? From Noah, the story then goes from Noah to Shem, right? From Shem to Eber, it goes all the way down. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. That's us, guys. There's no other people mentioned in that whole story, right? So what happened to these first white people? Well, it's possible that these people, because if you just look at archaeology, guys, right, we find buildings from 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, but we find even structures from 2,000 before Christ, right? But we also find structures 10,000 years. So before Adam was formed, we find already structures, right? Could it be that the Atlantean people were already the Adamic people, right? And we know that Atlantis fell, sank, and the writings tell us that was not just because of wars, but also intermixing. They started to intermix, and Atlantis fell, sank in the ground. But these people, of course, they were also in other places in the world, especially North Africa, right? Could it be that they were even the pyramid builders, right? We found structures in Europe that are like 8 to 10,000 years old, right? So what happened to have, God formed from all the Adam, right? But if we look even before the structures that are 10,000 years old, we found out there are giant trees. I mean, we always thought these were mountains. Now it turns out these are petrified giant trees. We find structures that are 50,000 years old, right? We find skeletons of, they call it Homo erectus. This was not Homo sapiens like they call us. Homo erectus was a primitive looking man, basically a two-legged creature, like an ape that walked on two legs, right? So when you look at all these old fossils they find, older, very older than this whole Genesis, guys, much older. Nowhere does it say, and God created the man and the Homo erectus, and he created all these. It doesn't say that. It doesn't say God created races, God created fallen angels. There's nothing in the creation about all, none of that. Nothing. So, giants, and God created giants. It's not there. God didn't create giants in Genesis, right? People say, well, the giants came because the fallen angels made it with women, and these women got pregnant, and a 1,000 feet giant came out. Guys, that word does not even mean giant. It means fallen one. Who are the fallen ones? Could it be that all these white people, maybe through intermixing, maybe to doing all kinds of wicked stuff, became fallen ones, right? And God chose Adam, right? The man Adam. Maybe one of those fallen ones went to Adam, right? Deceiving, or Eve, deceiving her, right? But there are fallen ones, angels. Could it be these people of a pre-Adamic world, right? Who already had a lot of technology, because we still don't understand how they built all that stuff 10,000 years ago. We don't. Somehow they had the technology to do, right? And there was a big destruction. The earth became empty and void. There was something happened. And now we have ruins, right? Dating back 10,000 years and even older, right? We find 50,000-year-old altars, right? So who knows? But isn't it possible, and that's what I think, that for example, the African race, the modern day African race is a mix of these Homo erectus creatures and men, right? Because, and if you don't believe, people don't believe me, let me Google it for you. Here, ghost DNA. Ghost DNA in West Africa refers to genetic materials found in modern West Africans that originated from an unknown archaic human group, right? So Africans have up to 20% non-human DNA. They want to be politically correct. They say, well, it is human, we just don't know what kind of human. No, this was of a mixing. Guys, this idea that that it was evolution. We started out as apes, and then these apes walked straight up, right? And then you had these black, straight up walking creatures, and then they went north, and Europe was colder, so they became white, and they went east, they became Chinese, right? This is nonsense. You don't change your race based on temperature. It does not happen, right? But what did happen is mixing. And we even see in the ancient Indian text from India how man intermixed with wood creatures, forest creatures, right? Maybe I can make a video about that, right? So, dinosaurs, giants, midgets, there were all kinds of creatures. And there were also two-legged creatures, as they call them. And I think they were part of a pre-Genesis creation, right? People say, well, they were wiped out by the worldwide flood of Noah. No, the flood of Noah was 2,300 years before Christ, right? But there are much older destructions on this earth already, right? Just the fact that they find evidence of floodings all over the world doesn't mean it was the same event, right? I'm going to go over in that biblical flood of Noah a little bit later. Let me write it down so I won't forget it. Flood of Noah. Guys, something happens. We know the Ice Age ended like 10,000 years ago. It started to warm up. It was also 10,000 years gradually, right? But before that, things happened. So isn't it possible? Is it possible that these people who have 20% ghost DNA are a mix of men with creatures from before Genesis? That survived, because we see in Africa they find evidence that these creatures already were there 50,000 years ago, but they didn't do anything, right? They survived some kind of cataclysm. They lived in these woods, right? And for thousands of years they didn't do anything. Could it be that they just survived these destructions and later came in contact with man, right? And for whatever reason, these men started to mate with them, maybe out of necessity. Who knows what happened? But there are ancient stories describing these things. Even Atlantis, the stories of Atlantis talk about that they started to mix, right? So I don't think God created different races. I think God started over with the Adamic people, but there were still other creatures around, right? We find even in Indonesia a race of people, they are only like 5 foot high as an adult, right? But does it say, oh, and Genesis created hobbits, and God created midgets, and God created. Where does it say that? Where is it described? Right? It is not there, guys. Also, the Mongolian race, right? Why does the Bible say, and God created the Mongolian race, and the African race, and the white race? It doesn't say that, right? And we know that the Chinese and the Japanese and the Mongolian, they have all the same ancestor. Also, there are stories about some kind of intermixing, right? By the way, Europeans, they say, some of us also have Neanderthal DNA, right? Even though that doesn't change the way who we are, we didn't get stupider, whatever, right? It is possible that some European people also made it with Neanderthals, right? In that sense, also black people are a mix of um, archaic race, the Homo erectus, right? All these hoax about Lucy, they found the link. Now, there is no missing link between apes and humans. There is none. Again, people don't change race based on geography or climate. People only change race based on mixing. Let me quickly go to the comments. Christina says, I guess that would explain legends of the wood nymphs and things like that. Yeah, there are many legends of all kinds of creatures. Also in Ireland, right? There's many legends of small people living there, right? But it doesn't say God created leprechauns, and it doesn't say that, guys. And we found areas in the Far East where people are still smaller than average, and they have a little bit of these archaic features, right? It was because at thousands of years ago there was an intermixing going on there. There are even stories about the white priestesses intermated with these creatures to create a slave race. Because these two-legged creatures were very strong, but they were very stupid. So if you mix them, they become a little bit more intelligent and less strong, the perfect slave race. Right? Yes, dragons, Philbreak. There is nothing here that talks about God created dragons, yet that language of dragons is used. Could it be that he had a knowledge of ancient creatures that no longer existed? Right? And all these dinosaurs, where did they come from? Where did God created dinosaurs? Right? Archaeology says they're millions of years old. Right? Some people say, the carbon dating is not accurate, right? But with modern day technology, they can really go look far back, right? But the thing is, this Bible is not about the archaic races and giants and the midgets and the leprechauns. This Bible is about, here, let me read it to you. I think it's in chapter 5. Listen what it says here. This book of the generations of Adam. In the day that God created Adam, in the likeness of God, he made him. Male and female created he them, blessed them, and called their name the Adam in the day they were created. Right? So this book is about Adam, not about Shaka Zulu, not about Kunta Kinte. This book is about the Adam. And you can even go to Luke. It's all described. The genealogy from Adam to this king, to this king, to this king, to this, all the way to Jesus, right? And the story didn't end with Jesus because we are that woman described, the mystery woman of Revelation. And who is the child? It's not Jesus. That's what people think. It's talking about Holy Mother of God, Mary, and she had a child. That's not what Revelation is talking about. It's talking about the woman with 12 stars over her head. That is symbolism for Israel. Who is the child? Well, it says those who keep the commandments of God and have the Christ. That is the child of that woman. The woman is Israel, and from that Israel would come the believers. And the dragon is wroth with those believers. Right? We are the body of Christ. We are therefore the bride. That's how Jesus reconciled us. Right? Because we are to be one with Jesus. Right? Most believers put Jesus outside somewhere. You have to shout and sing there. But there's very few who realize that Christ is actually in us, right? Guys, have you seen the documentary There Are No Forests? Right? Do you know Devil's Tower? Where is it? California? They say it's lava. Guys, lava doesn't create towers like that. That's not what lava does at all. And you can see all these columns when you look at the tree. It's tree roots. It has hexagonal, what's the name? Columns. These are petrified ancient trees. Much, much, much older than the Bible. Right? What does the Bible say? And I created giant trees. No, God started over again. He gave us what we have now. He built upon the ruins. Right? Let me go a little bit back in the comments, guys. I have to scroll back up a little bit. I'm sorry if I miss comments, guys. Yeah, Crystal says it ain't working out. No, it's not working out. And we try to get all these creatures in, and now we said, well, God created everybody equal anyway. Right? But we have forgotten how important it is to be a people with a common background, a common history, common forefathers, a common spirit, a common father, which we all share. If you have a country like where I'm from, right? 99%, when I grew up was 99% white. There is this natural sense of unity. You don't have all this struggle, all this tension, all these different race groups fighting for dominion, fighting for... no, everything was so calm. It was natural. But if you bring in other races with other desires, other views, of course it's going to be chaos. A black man really, really cares for your future. Now, they created now in America where everybody deserves to be happy, right? It sounds good, right? Proverbs says, right? It may sound good unto a man, but the end thereof is destruction. Right? We were supposed to be holy set apart people, but he said, now we didn't say that, by the way. It was the moment we made the people of Edom equal citizens in Europe. These people of Edom have always tried to find places to live because they didn't have nothing for themselves. So they always wanted to go in other people's nations. But their traditions, the Canaanite traditions, and there was I cannot even mention it, the horrifying things that happened. If I would do that, I don't know what would happen to this video. But these people caused a lot of havoc and anger, and they were kicked out like 110 times, right? So they wanted to be in our nations, right? In the land that our Father gave us to dwell on, in our piece of land. They wanted to be part of that because there was blessings, there was money to be made, right? So they stirred up the people against the King of France, the Christian monarch, right? There were all kinds of problems, and they stirred up the people against the king. It's his fault, right? And it came to the point that they even beheaded the whole Christian royal family. And this is where Edom took control over the minds. And they even vowed, this is why the secret societies came up. And they vowed to create a new world, right? No longer Europe for the European people. How dare they? We want to take control over this land, right? Esau wants to take control, and he has that control right now. It's called the short season where Satan was loosed. Esau got the blessing from his father Isaac, because even though the birthright was not going to go to Esau, right? Don't forget that Isaac still blessed Esau, but it was going to be temporary. Why? Because Esau right now is showing the whole world that he is incapable of governing this world in love and righteousness. And this just that people don't want to see it yet. People are slowly waking up now. But at the same time, they still think that Esau is God's chosen son. Even they think Esau is Jacob, right? And Esau, who was not part of the land, God gave not Europe to Esau. Esau moved into Europe, killed the last Christian monarchs, and they vowed to de-Christianize the West. And there was a whole brainwash propaganda going on in the 1800s. Right? And now in the beginning of the 1900s, you had the new schooling system, right? The Rockefellers came up with that, and they started to brainwash our children, right? Then we had all these wars, the First World War, Second World War, and after the Second World War, that was basically Esau made sure that no one ever would rise up against them anymore, right? And now Esau, who doesn't care about that God gave us this land, only cries that they deserve land too. Even though they have their own land, they still want to be among us. They want to tell us how to think, what is right, what is wrong. They throw money at our leaders. They control the leaders. They tell the schools. They are in the schools. This whole Marxism and equality did not come from us. It came from people who didn't belong to us in the first place, and they forced themselves to be equal. And the moment we did that, all gates of hell were opened. They took us away from our God. We lowered our standards through brainwash to be more like them, and we accepted their Canaanite Babylonian philosophy of equality. And they created all these organizations to bring also the rest of the world in. In America, Esau started to, because they had the money, they had the ships, right? They bought themselves, like they still do, they bought themselves stocks, they bought themselves into the Western companies, right? Like the Dutch VOC was the largest company in the world, right? When Esau was kicked out of Spain, they came to Holland and England, and they started to buy themselves into these trading companies, and they started the slave trade. They are behind now mass immigration. They are behind the fact that, if that is the real story, that they killed Charlie Kirk, because what the Edomite people of Esau teach in these schools. This is where these people teach our children critical race theory. These Marxist professors teach us about Afrocentrism, anti-whiteness. So now even our children are crazy. But all people do is trying to compromise. Well, there are some good ones. Maybe we can find a middle ground. Where did Jesus ever say, let's find a middle ground? Where did Jesus ever say, okay, I want you to go over to Africa, bring all these people here, and don't forget, there's going to come a new religion, Islam. I want you to bring them in as well. And now you can make different altars and different gods, build mosques all over the way, right? And walk away from God, right? Take away religion, take away Christianity out of the public places, out of the schools, right? And just bring on other races and other spirits, right? So you can all hold hands, sing Kumbaya. Where does it say all that, guys? And now we have Andrew Tate as one of the ambassadors of truth. And Andrew Tate might go against a lot of truth, but first of all, how come that he is so big? What is so special about him? Why do they allow them to say certain things? But Andrew Tate is a broken cistern. He is already half black, half white. Why would he care to preserve our race? Right? Can't you see? Don't you know the clergy plan? To mix everything up to the point that there is no more white men. And Andrew Tate, the Hodge twins, Nick Fuentes, they all advocated for it still. Because they say, see, I'm a mixed man, but I'm here telling you truth. So it doesn't matter if you're black or mixed. We are the truth tellers now. But in the meanwhile, the white man is disappearing. In England, I think 70% of babies being born is not even English. So you just wait another 20, 30 years and white people will be gone. Or at least a very despised minority, like what's his name always says. That's true. I came to the same conclusion. Look how they treat us now. They are stabbing white people in trains for being white. He said so. I got myself a white girl. I got that white girl. White people are attacked all the time for no reason. It's almost on a daily basis in Europe. So it is important, guys. But slowly, but more gradually, but more and more quickly, this is new narrative being brought out, especially through people like Nick Fuentes and Andrew Tate, that it is okay to be mixed and lead everything. It doesn't matter if the white people go extinct. Nick Fuentes says he's a white man. He speaks on behalf of white men, right? But he's not a white man. He looks white, but he's not a white man. And I just think it's strange that he got such a big platform and they allow him to speak all these truths. That's really strange in my eyes, right? And how come that all these people, Charlie Kirk, Nick, they all know each other since childhood? How is that possible, right? And now in England there was this march. They some say it was 1 million people. I'm glad the English people are waking up, right? You know, a few years ago if I talked about this, the English people always said, "No, that's racist. We are not racist. We just don't want Islam too much." But now I already said it's not even about Islam. It's about race. You'll see in a few years, you will find out that it is not even about religion. It's about race. And they say, "Oh, Chris." And now you can see that white people indeed say, "Listen, we are English. If you come from Somalia here, that doesn't make you English. And if your child grows up in England and he speaks with an English language, that does not make him English." But also in England, you see these truth channels. There's this Pakistani guy from India. He grew up in England and he speaks on behalf of the English people. Do you see this subtle brainwash in that? Because you look at this Pakistani man, but he speaks English and oh, he's one of us. That's why I say we have to go first to the full truth of the European white man, right? Before we can make any, what are we gonna do with the others, right? I'm not saying it's not gonna be a bad thing, right? But now it's more and more black people, mixed people who are now the ambassadors of our truth, right? And like I said, many Mexicans carry Jewish DNA, Arab DNA. That is because Spain was invaded by Jews and Arabs. They mixed, many of them mixed. So Nick Fuentes is half Mexican. That means that Nick Fuentes also has either Arab or Jewish blood. And yes, Jews can sound very conservative. I hope you can see my point. Where are the white people? 100 years ago, this was unheard of. Now it's normal because they speak truth. When are we going to go back to the truth first? Because there will be none of us left in 100 years. In a few decades, everybody's going to be an Andrew Tate. Andrew Tate is basically, technically, an Arab. Because the Hebrew word Arab means to become darker. So if you are half black, you are technically an Arab. So we have now Arabs telling the white European people the truth. The Bible speaks about broken vessels. If you are no longer white, you have no longer a desire to preserve the white man. Why would you? Right? It's the same thing when people have the flu. They're afraid to get the flu, but once they have the flu, they don't care if other people get the flu. Same thing with homosexuals who have HIV. They don't care giving someone else HIV because they already have it themselves. The moment you have something yourself, you stop caring. That's just the way it is. Tony S says, but how did they exist before Adam existed if they're hybrids? Well, like I said, before Adam existed, before Genesis, they were still these two-legged creatures, right? And when the white man was created, somehow the white man entered these regions and somehow they intermixed, right? I mean, guys, they even admitted, you can still find it on Google, that they have up to 20% non-human DNA. They call it ghost DNA. They want to sell, yeah, it's still human. Guys, up to 20%. That means there was some kind of mixing going on. Joe says contradictions don't exist. First century was a transitional period between old and new covenant, death and condemnation versus grace, work versus grace. So the P is contradictory during transition. Yes, people go against Paul because he was against the law. No, Paul was going against the law, circumcision, animal sacrifice, all these things, right? Paul was telling the Israelites in Judah, not the Jews not the Israelites. The real Israelites were united with the northern house of Edom, exactly according to prophecy, right? And they would not be called Jews. They became Christians. And the ones who were not of a sheep, they became known as Jews, but they were actually Edomites living in Judah. So they only called themselves Judeans or Jews by geography. Just like someone from Africa, he has been in America for a few generations. So now a black African man who has been in America calls himself an American, but he's only an American by geography because he's still African in nature. He's still African in race, right? Same thing. If I would go to Japan and I make a white son, that white son is maybe a Japanese citizen, but he's not a Japanese man by race. He would still be a European man, right? Same thing with the Edomites and the Canaanites in Judah. They were only Judeans by geography, not by race. And Jesus said, "There are many here who are not of my sheep," right? But the real Judeans, the real Israelites, because not everyone of Israel was of Israel, the real Israelites who still kept the law, and when Paul preached the gospel to the Greeks, right, the Greeks were saved by grace through faith. But the ones who still used to the law, they said, no, it is faith, but they still have to keep the law, circumcision. And Paul said, no, it's not the circumcision of the flesh, it's circumcision of the heart, right? Well, there's no more that law. That law is done away with. We are now, the law is now written on our hearts. There's no more physical circumcision. There's no more animal sacrifice. There's no more temple worship. You are the temple of God now. That's why they don't like Paul, because they don't understand that, right? And the lost tribes, who became known as the Greeks, and they were among the nations, the European nations, they no longer did these things, right? They were divorced, right, because of their idolatry and the sins, right? But it was not that they had to go back to the law of Moses and then they would be reconciled. No, they were reconciled because of what Christ did. It was not by the law. They were reconciled through grace, through faith. That's how they were reconciled, right? But if you believe in Jew and Gentile doctrine, you're never going to figure these things out. And still the churches don't really understand what they're teaching. Is it grace? Are we saved by this? Can you lose your salvation? All these things, all this confusion. And it was, like Joe says, it was a transition period between the circumcision of the flesh and the circumcision of the heart. Nothing to do that Paul was against the law, right? Paul even says, "So we then, well, you know the scriptures." Sonny says, "Chris showed up in my feed, and how I got here today. I was surprised I had forgotten about Chris. But anyway, bye for now. Have a nice day." All right, Sonny. Lamb says, "May I suggest?" Yeah, thank you, Lamb, for a suggestion to watch my channel. I'm sorry, I cannot go over these comments today, guys. Lamb says, "Yes, I heard about the clergy plan." Yeah. And the irony is that Andrew Tate and Nick Fuentes are now the mouthpieces of truth, but they are part of the clergy plan. Can't you see? The clergy plan wants to mix the white people out of their race. That there are no more white people left, only mixed people. And now we have these mixed people, and they are now telling us the truth. They are part of the clergy plan. And unless we start to realize who we are, that we are the people of Adam, we're not going to live. We're going to perish. And we only going to have mixed people only. Broken vessels. Right? I'm not saying if you're a broken vessel, you're going to go to hell for it. I'm not saying that. Right? God is not going to torture people for all eternity. The book is about dominion. Who is going to be led by God and create order? Who's going to do that? Well, we did for a long time. And now we have all these races and all these mixes, and everything is becoming chaotic. Yes, Brandy Cole says, if my people which are called by my name shall humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will forgive their sins and will heal their land. 2 Chronicles 7:14. Amen, Brandy. So it is very important, guys, to understand that we are the people who are called by his name. And if we start to compromise and we share that, we are now where we are now. Yeah. And the economy and all the murders and all the LGBTQ, it's all consequences of these things. Right? So Charlie Kirk can debate transgenders all day long, but these are all the consequences of us not wanting to admit that we are the people called by his name. If you share that calling, you go outside of God's will and you create chaos. The foundations of the earth are shaking symbolically because it is law. God gave us the law, and through Christ we have now the law in us. But we cannot just forget about all that and then start to compromise and then find ways to make it work, because it's obviously not working. But the church still teaches, well, it's not important, right? And especially the Arabs coming in from Syria, Afghanistan, right? Keir Starmer wants to bring 10 million more Muslims in over the next years. And all we have to do is to convert them, right? Guys, we are being destroyed, literally. Okay, Christina. Yeah, I've noticed a lot of comments is also people talk to each other. Okay, thank you for that, Christina. So, guys, dinosaurs, dragons, giant trees. I'm not talking about the trees in California. I'm talking about a tree that was probably 2-3 miles high. And we find them. We thought they were mountains. They turn out to be trees. And God didn't create these things in Genesis. There's nothing about this in Genesis. So there were creatures from a pre-Genesis who survived some kind of cataclysm, right? But we always have a tendency to do stupid stuff. Even Plato wrote about the reason that Atlantis was destroyed was of mixing. And we see that mixing going on. And every time that happens, things get destroyed. We had a beautiful, big civilization in India. The Indo-European people come from that region. And there were darker races there. There was an intermixing, and India fell apart, and it is now a third world country. Same thing in Egypt. Same thing everywhere. And now we see Europe starts to intermix. And it is now being destroyed. America makes it the main doctrine that America is for everybody and his mother. And America is now being destroyed. And the White House can tell you all day that it has been better than ever. I don't know. Do you notice it? I don't see it. Maybe the stock market. I don't see it. Keir Starmer too. Oh, we did so many things already. Oh, the economy is getting better. Really? It's not getting better. Right? Yeah, Gideon. They call it DEI. They come up with all these ideas and it's not getting better. Right? So, like I said in the beginning of this video, we have to go back to the truth of Adam without any compromising, because Adam is perishing. Right? So we have to understand who Christ is, what Christ did. Right? He united us. He restored Adam. Jesus, the last Adam, he restored us. And now we're trying to share our dominion, our birthright with other people. And it is becoming chaos. Right? But everybody deserves, right, this. Right? We have a responsibility for everybody. All religions are equal. Freedom of religion, right? All humanity is. If we keep believing that, we're creating more and more and more destruction, right? And YouTube and the media loves black people within the blue pill to tell you that they are on your side. They love it, right? They love to show you Andrew Tate and Nick Fuentes. They love it because see, they are not really white, but they tell you the truth. They keep the narrative going that someday everybody will see. We're not going to see the truth this way. There come a day that we're going to see it. But so far, things are not going to get better. And I already said it. The bad things are going to happen. You see it every day now. Right? And then that white girl gets stabbed by one of these monsters. One of these demons. Right? And everybody talks about it. Then suddenly, oh, look what happened to Charlie Kirk. And now many people already forgot about that white girl. Right? What's going to happen next week that we suddenly kind of forget about Charlie Kirk? Normally these things would last for months. People would talk about it. Now it's one thing after another. You already forgot about the Epstein files. Isn't that convenient? Right? Guys, God flooded. Oh yeah, I was going to talk about the flood of Noah. Right? This idea that God flooded the entire globe, if you believe it's a globe, right? And everything was covered in 6 foot of water. That means the Himalayas, that the water must have been like 10 miles high, 10 kilometers high. This is nonsense, guys, right? Just the fact that there are some evidence of floodings all over the world doesn't mean it was the same event. Where did these Edomite people live in the time of Noah? Where did that all start? It started in the Middle East, right? And not in the modern day Middle East, what has been taken over by Arabs. I'm talking about our biblical story that started there, right? And God, they became so mixed up. They probably already, they say, well, they mixed with animals. No, they didn't mix with dogs and goats. They mixed with other races. That's why it became so evil. That's why God wiped them out. That's why the Bible says, but Noah was still perfect in his genealogy, also his sons. But they don't like that story, so yeah, God started over with a Negro and with a Mongolian and a Caucasian to keep the narrative going. No, Noah did not have 3 different races as sons, right? That flood was local because some African people, they are like 50,000 or 100,000 years old. That is like 100,000 years older than the flood of Noah. Right? They survived that. They were never touched by the flood of Noah. Right? And Jesus said the last days will be as in the time of Noah. Look what's happening in America and Europe. It's the same thing. Right? Liberalism, mixing different religions. Look how evil it's getting, guys. But even the conservative Republicans keep saying that America is for everybody. Right? Just not the ones who have bad intentions, not the criminals. But other than that, it's for everybody. In the meantime, the white people are being erased from America, from Canada, South Africa. Look what's happening in South Africa and Europe. Right? But you try to keep on compromising. Right? We're gonna keep Andrew Tate on a pedestal because he stands for truth. At the same time, you see a half-black man. It's all brainwashed. It's all part of the blue pill, guys. When are we gonna tell the truth? Why do we need other races to tell us the truth about our future? Okay, guys, we're going to leave it here today. God bless you all. And think about these things, guys, because we are at the end. At least at the end of our generations from Adam. Look around. All right, I love you guys. See you next week.